Hey, Michael. Hi.
Hey, Audian, nice to see you today.
Nice to see you again. Started 1 minute late. All right, so we're off to a great start. Yeah, this is what the sixth time that we've done a project like this together, right?
Something like that, yes. Thanks for the opportunity. Good to be talking about this topic again.
Yeah, this is this one, the first edition of this that we did 4 years ago is still one of my favorite ones because it's really dead center in what we do in terms of email security. But I like to see the actual data in terms of because we have one point of view, the industry, Verizon, they all have the different points of view in terms of how big the problem is, how they rank it. But I like to get some empirical data, like actually how much time are people spending on this, and this one gave us some good data, and it really resonated a lot with our existing customers and prospective customers we talked to, because a lot of them say, yeah, that's about right, or ours is a little bit more, a little bit less. And what's also super interesting about this, and the reason that I reached out to you to do it again, wasn't just because of refresh, because a very interesting factor. When we did the first report, that came out 4 weeks before ChatGPT came out. So, and of course, we timed it that way. We knew, of course, that was going to come out. So we wanted to do this research ahead of time, so we had a good baseline, pre-AI. And
oh yeah, right? There you go.
That's I'm going to stick with that line. But it's really interesting because as soon as that came out, I immediately started thinking, wow, this is going to change a lot of stuff. And I was thinking about the data. I was wondering, over the next couple of years, how some of the data that you're going to share today was going to change compared to the first one we did. And honestly, I wouldn't have been surprised if it had been extreme in either direction. If the amount of time people spent on emails, for instance, went down by by half or more, or went the other direction. Just didn't really know, because there's a lot of other factors. It's not just an AI tool for the practitioners that we serve, but it's also in the hands of the adversaries that we're constantly battling. So anyhow, I'll turn it over to you, and you can kind of start to walk people through the report, and I'll just jump in every now and then with questions or comments.
Yeah, and Audian, I agree that as the subsequent years have unfolded, we've done a number of other reports on topics like image-based attacks and QR code phishing. We've looked at the adoption of AI from a defensive side, and all of those inputs change what this looks like. And now 4 years later, we finally have the data to be able to do something about that and have a look at what that looks like. So Audian, you didn't introduce yourself. You're the principal technical strategist at IRONSCALES. I'm the principal analyst at Osterman Research. We've been working together for a number of years, as Audian said, across a number of research reports, and I encourage you to have a look at the IRONSCALES website to get access to those. But the one that we're talking about today is the one that is focused on the business cost of phishing. And in order to put this research together, we surveyed 128 practitioners across IT security manager or team lead roles, IT manager or team lead, email security, SOC manager, security manager. We were looking for practitioners that had direct responsibility for managing email security posture in the United States in organizations with between 1,000 and 5,000 employees. And there were no industry restrictions or exclusions. We were looking for a cross-industry sense of what was going on. The key findings that we see in this research, and we'll talk through these in our time together today: 16% faster remediation per incident in comparison to our baseline from 4 years ago, 9% more hours in comparison to the baseline from 4 years ago across IT and security teams on phishing. 50% of practitioners ranked phishing as high or extreme threat. 62.5% of practitioners saying that deepfake attacks are immediately disruptive to their organization. And the overall sense that you get from this research, and again, I'd encourage you to get a copy of it from the IRONSCALES website, and you'll probably get outreach from IRONSCALES after this webinar with a link to download a copy for yourself, is that there's an attacker versus defender efficiency battle that AI has unleashed on both sides of the equation. The first big research finding is around the rising threat of phishing. As Audian said, we did this research in October 2022, and no, there was no great foresight. What happened was that ChatGPT was released a month later. And so the really big question for us in redoing this research 4 years on is, what's the impact of AI for organizations in terms of the business cost of phishing? Some of the preliminary questions that we asked practitioners were around how phishing was sitting in their organization. 50% said that it was a high or extreme threat. Now, in 2022, when we asked this question, that was 33%. So this has increased significantly over that time frame. The thing that changes over the 3 time periods that we asked about, practitioners, what was it like 12 months ago? What's it like currently? And what do you expect that it will be in 12 months' time? Is this extreme threat line. The high threat line stays the same. The extreme threat line has gone up from 12 months ago to currently, and the practitioners in this research expected that it was going to decline in 12 months. Now, why is that? Either that is a hope that as a result of stuff happening, the threat at the extreme level is going to go down, or it's an indication of grounded strategy, that as a result of innovations across security teams and IT teams, as a result of embracing technology in the email security space to increase posture and strengthen what you're doing, that the anticipation is that that's going to decline. Hey, time will tell. And there's some dynamics in here that we may look at as well.
Yeah, I pushed on that a little bit there, just because, we have a different, we have a line of sight to a lot of these practitioners. And in the deals that we see, I think the optimism usually comes from teams that just deployed an AI native detection, right? And then they saw an immediate fit. I think the pessimists are the ones still running a gateway plus training and hoping. So I'd argue it's kind of grounded for one segment and hope for the other, right? So
okay.
I'd venture to guess that the 12-month number there is really those two populations averaged together.
Okay. Yeah. So I should really say false hope on this slide rather than hope.
Yeah.
Okay, let's not be so cruel.
Yeah.
We asked practitioners to give us a sense of how key attributes of phishing are changing over the past 12 months and what their expectation is in the upcoming 12 months. We asked about attributes like number of attacks, speed of attacks, and evasiveness of attacks. This is the group out of the practitioners that see threat decreasing. In other words, it's going down. Fewer organizations expect a decreased threat over the next 12 months in comparison to the next 12 months. It's going to get worse, in other words. Those that see no change in threat, you can see that this increases. So in all cases, for all of these attributes, the practitioners in this research anticipate that what they've seen in the past 12 months will carry forward without change over the next 12 months. The one that increases for 2 of the 3 and is the most significant number out of the 3 different potential answers is those that see the threat increasing. So the threat scape is worsening across speed of attacks, evasiveness of attacks, and for the respondents, while it's the largest number, there is a decline from 45.3 to 43.8% of those who expect that the threat is going to get worse out of these. Now, there are various
2 percentage points. The bottom line is I mean,
it's getting
across
worse.
the board. It's getting worse.
Getting worse across the line. Yep.
Yep.
It's either staying the same or it's getting worse. Many fewer are saying that the threat will decrease. Yeah, that's right. That's the bottom line. There are key types of phishing attacks. Phishing isn't just a single entity anymore. There's compromised account credentials, which results in internal phishing. These are of particular concern to organizations because they bypass employee skepticism because employees assume that internal email is screened and safe. We have things like advanced obfuscation to hide phishing threats. And this creates an environment where employees are perpetually exhausted because perpetual vigilance is exhausting. Just because a message scans as safe doesn't mean that it is safe, and it requires a zero trust posture on every message, every link, every attachment, every minute of the day, which is an unsustainable approach for humans to deal with alone.
You know, a
The use
little
of
color commentary on that. Sorry, exactly what you just mentioned about doing that on a repeated basis. There's a lot of our customers are, you know, they have a lot of they just deal with processes. So it could be insurance, right, or mortgage companies where they see the same email that looks exactly the same from sometimes a variety of people, and so this has a very similar subject line, and the layout of it is exactly what. So they just have muscle memory. Oh, I see this. I know how to click here. And what we see, for instance, one unique type of attack is the image-based attack. You mentioned the study we did on that over a year ago, where attackers will. They know exactly what those forms look like. They know what software generates them, and they create an image that looks exactly like the text of one of those emails, and that's what they send. But in addition to that, they're using AI and automation to be able to target, so they know which people use that software who see those type of templates on a regular basis. It's just not realistic to ask a user who has to see sometimes 5, 10, or 50 of those a day to slow down and inspect each email. That's not their job. So
yeah, it's unsustainable. You're right. That's good color commentary. I like that. Yeah, absolutely. Use of AI for highly personalized phishing attacks, all of the malicious signals that we've trained employees to look at, spelling, grammar, language that doesn't sound quite right. AI designs all of that out, and open source intelligence sources are easily available for threat actors to understand who the people they want to attack are, what topics will resonate with them, who their friends are, who they work with, who their manager is. And therefore, attacks become much more highly personalized and therefore more difficult for someone to detect. And the final type of phishing attack that I'll touch on briefly is multi-stage phishing attacks across multiple tools. And for many organizations, employees aren't trained on phishing attacks outside of email. And there's a much higher trust in messages that appear in Teams or Slack or SMS as compared to those that appear in email. So if we look at these 4 types of phishing attacks, when we asked practitioners in this research to indicate their concern, somewhere between 5.5 out of 10 and 6 out of 10 said that they were highly concerned or extremely concerned across these 4 different types: compromised account credentials, advanced obfuscation, AI by threat actors, and so on. In combination, these types of phishing threats create phishing attacks that aren't obvious. And when employees have been trained to identify obvious threats, it's no surprise that these obviously slip past. You want to talk about business cost of phishing now, Audian?
this is the good stuff. I've been waiting for this. Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. The big question that we had in this research is, what is the net effect of the last 4 years of change across the environment for the business cost of phishing? We asked practitioners to give us an indication of the time that it takes for them to deal with a single phishing email. And this is the distribution of time brackets. So when we asked in 2022, you can see that 10.3% of practitioners said that they were spending, on average, less than 5 minutes per phishing email. 18.3% was spending between 5 and 15. When we asked in the most recent round, you can see that there is a couple of changes. Now, the most significant one is the proportion that has jumped from 16, that goes from 16 to 30 minutes. That's jumped from 27% in our previous round to 46.9% this time. The one that's changed that has the biggest impact on this overall statement, that the time to deal with a single phishing email has declined on average, is the change here, where fewer organizations are in these higher time brackets. We've gone from 29.4% in the 31 to 45 down to 15.6%, and we've gone from 13.1% in 46 to 60 minutes down to 4.7. Now, in order to figure out the average time across this distribution, you do the multiplication of the middle of the range against the proportion of organizations or practitioners that say that that's what the time is for them. And this gives you the contribution per distribution that you then sum. So on average, across all practitioners from 4 years ago, it took 27.5 minutes per phishing message from the point of detection to the complete elimination and removal of that from an organization's environment. In the most recent range, in the most recent research, you can see that the contributions have shifted back towards the lower numbers. So the 16 to 30 minute has increased significantly. The 31 to 45 has declined. The 46 to 60 has declined. So on average, we've gone down to 23.2. Now, again, this is an average number. This is an average. It's not reflective of a given organization, and any particular organization could be across this distribution. So there was still, we just jump back a couple of slides, 15.6% of practitioners who said that in their organization it takes 31 to 45 minutes. 4.7% of organizations said it takes 46 to 60 minutes. But on average, the number has declined over the last 4 years since we did this research. And Audian, a few years ago, we did a report together around the adoption of AI-powered email defenses and how that was becoming an essential part of security posture. And I think that is absolutely the reason that we see this decline in time per phishing email. You have anything you want to say before we move on?
In terms of the averages, I was thinking about this the other day, because over the years when we showed the original report and those numbers to customers, more often than not, we'd ask them if that reflects where they fall in that spectrum, and just by asking them to quantify that, think about it. At first, they would state a number that was on the lower end a little bit, and then as we have additional conversations, they might change that number. They say, I've been thinking about it, and actually, when they really think about the total amount of time they're spending on this stuff, that if they're honest, they say the time goes up. It's one of those things where we're all pretty good about, oftentimes, rounding down quite a bit. But then if they're really trying to figure out, okay, what's this costing me? And especially if they're trying to make a business case internally to get more resources or spend more money or make some sort of change, then they take a closer look at this and start to measure. So the short of that is I wouldn't be surprised if for all these respondents is the numbers actually a little bit higher, right? Because, based on those anecdotal conversations that I've participated in.
Yeah, and I guess the challenge that we have from a research perspective is that we can ask what the respondent believes to be the case, and we can follow a chain of logic through from their answer to question to question, which is what we're going to do now. An organization like yours has the opportunity to take a different view and do some quantitative statistics and analysis on the actual time. And I mean, that's always an interesting comparison where you go, what is the perceived time, which we're able to look at and then do research and, put together a line of argument around, versus what is the actual based on the numbers that you would see from the optics that you have. But usually, those are both interesting things.
The larger organizations will either have that number, they know the number, or they can actually go get the number because they have the tools in place, because they measure all of that on a regular basis. On the smaller side of the organizations, they don't always have those tools, so they're going to have to make a best estimate, and I'd say it's probably pretty close. They probably undersell a little bit.
There you go. Well, a research a research project like this provides something for organizations that don't have those optics to then be able to go, on average, what we've seen across the industry is X, Y, and Z, and this has an implication for us as an organization, and therefore we need to act in A, B, or C. Yeah. Okay, let's push on. So in calculating the cost then of the business cost of phishing, we followed a 4-stage process back in 2022, and we're going to do the same thing in this research. So first of all, we calculate the cost of a composite professional. We then calculate the average cost per phishing email. We look at the cost across a likely distribution, and then we look at the proportion of annual salary that, by implication, based on what the practitioners have told us in the research, they are spending of their annual salary on phishing. So the composite professional in this case means that because we have asked practitioners across job roles to complete this survey, we take each of those job roles, and then depending on the percentage of practitioners in each of those job roles, we multiply it by an annual salary and benefits, fully burdened. This is a number taken from the public salary scales that we have access to, and then it gives us a composition to a composite professional. So on average, based on the percentage of practitioners that took this research, we have a total annual cost of $142,300 for the composite professional, or 71.15 per hour. Now, over the last few years, that's gone up slightly from 68.26. So step one, the cost of the composite professional has increased. The second thing that we do is we figure out the average cost to deal with a phishing email. Now, for any organization that is spending between 31 and 45 minutes, on average, each phishing email costs that organization $44.47. On average, for an organization that's spending 46 to 60 minutes per phishing email from initial detection through to complete elimination from their environment, they're spending 62.25. But across the average, well, first of all, these costs have increased since 2022, but across all of this, on average, the time has declined, and the cost, the average cost per phishing email has declined as well. We've dropped from 31.32 in 2022 to 27.51 per message on average in this most recent research round.
I will, on that note, I'm going to paste in the chat here for everybody right now. I did a blog last week, the week before that, on this. And in there is a calculator. And I think it's a useful calculator for anybody on this call here, because what you can do is you can kind of adjust it for you. So if you put in there, nobody else will see this, right? But you can put in about how many emails you deal with on a daily basis, and about how on average how long it takes, and it'll show you, use the math from this report to show you what that would actually cost. So that might be something useful if you're trying to build a business case internally.
Excellent. And then step 3 means that we look at the distribution of those costs as the number of phishing attacks increase. Now, the first column is the phishing messages: 1, 250, 1,000, 7.5, 15, 20. Some organizations, that's going to be an annual figure. Some organizations, one of those might be a monthly figure, depending on whatever cadence you're looking at for the number of phishing messages, and depending on, for your organization, how long it is taking you per phishing message. This is the amount that you are committing, depending on the band, the number of phishing messages, to dealing with the elimination of phishing for your environment. So in best case, let's say an organization gets 250 phishing messages per year. They spend less than 5 minutes dealing with each one. It's $741. Worst case, you'd have an organization with 20,000 phishing messages. It's taking them more than 60 minutes per message to deal with. They're investing $1.7 million. in order to deal with that across their organization. So the cost across a likely distribution has increased over the last 4 years since we did this research previously.
Yeah. And to make those numbers even a little more tangible, relatable, because sometimes when you see a number like 1,000 or 7,500, it feels abstract. And I like to break stuff down. So I just did some quick math on the 7,500 number. And if let's say that's how many, what that turns out to, if you were to divide it by the, a full year using a 5-day work week, that's 28 messages, phishing emails a day. So that, you might think nowhere close to 7,000. Well, maybe it's along the lines of 5,000. And still, when you say, but if you feel like it's not that much, actually, if you get 10 or 15 a day, you're getting up there.
Starting to get up there.
Yeah. And again, just like the numbers in terms of the amount of time people spend on it, if people just going from, just guessing off the top of their head, they're probably going to undershoot the number of phishing messages they spend time on.
The final step that we ask about is the amount of hours, of the available hours that your organization has, what percentage of those are being devoted to phishing. In our previous research, it was 33.5% across IT and security teams. In this most recent round, that has increased to 36.5% of available hours for IT and security teams. So what that means is that if we take that value of the composite professional, what was it, 142,300, and we multiply that by 36.5, then on average, out of each IT or security professional in an organization, 36.5% or $51,948 of annual salary and benefits is being devoted to phishing. Now that's per IT or security professional. So as your organization has more, and as that percentage continues, carries across 36.5, then you are spending a higher, this is what your proportion or cost looks like as you start adding more IT or security pros. Now, if we put all of this together, we calculate the cost of composite professional, average cost per phishing email, proportion of annual salary. In our previous research, which in this slide I'm calling pre-AI, it was 68.26 per hour. Post-AI, 71.17. It's gone up. Average cost per phishing email, 31.32 per message. Pre-AI, 27.51 per message. Post-AI, on average. And the proportion of annual salary for phishing, 33.5% of hours committed pre-AI, 36.5% of hours committed post-AI. More messages, more time, cost has gone up.
So I'm glad you added that box there, because without it, somebody might say, well, of course, the hours committed in terms is in the price of that total price has gone up just because the cost of labor has gone up. But that actually doesn't have nearly as much bearing on this as the sheer amount of the volume of messages coming through. That's the thing that really changed the curve. So even though they're spending less time per message, the total amount of messages they're dealing with has gone up, and that's really the big driver behind these numbers.
And Audian, what's unknown and what's untested and what we have yet to see if we do this research again in another 4 years' time is how that line of number of messages that get through to inboxes changes. Because generative AI and some of the other things that we'll speak about in a few moments put in the hands of threat actors the ability to greatly increase the number of messages, greatly increase the sophistication, greatly increase the evasiveness of those, which in combination, in worst case, could mean that more and more is getting through that just compromises and ruins this entire channel, unless organizations have the ability to do something about it.
Yeah.
Now, the business cost of phishing calculation in this research ignores several costs. We did this in 2022. We ignored them then. We'll ignore them now. Organizations can't ignore them, But in terms of this research, we have ignored costs like data breach notification, loss of customer trust, loss of corporate reputation and market value, and any regulatory fines that flow from compromised data, or a breach or a ransomware incident as a result of the implications of a phishing attack. These costs you can't ignore, but we have ignored them in this research to just focus on the direct operational cost of phishing.
So you're saying it's you and I that put in that picture in the background, that's you and I, right? Not
Absolutely.
not our audience. Okay.
Head in the sand. Yeah, this is us. Absolutely. We asked the practitioners in this research to give us a sense of new threat trends that would affect the time and cost equation over the upcoming time period. We asked for an assessment of deepfake technology, the use of generative AI by threat actors, and the use of compromised vendor and partner accounts in back business email compromise attacks. And you can see here that ranging from 57 for the bottom one through to 62.5 for the two top ones, practitioners are saying this is highly impactful or extremely impactful to them. Deepfake technology provides the ability for threat actors to create attacks that are more sophisticated, have greater levels of deception, and can create attacks on a much faster cadence. Now, Audian, the last time you and I spoke, we released the research that we did around deepfake. So that would be something that perhaps we can point the listeners today to.
No, I mean, that number tracks with what we see. I mean, and the practical problem for at least for this audience, is that, we look at what we've been doing in the past, or enterprise organization been doing in the past, is the SAT, security awareness training has spent like a decade teaching, their employees to spot bad grammar and weird URLs, and none of that transfers to these new channels, new attack methods. None of those these teachings transfer to detecting something anomalous in voice or video, right? So the detection now has to move from behavioral to behavioral and biometric signals. Because the artifact spotting, if we should try to tell people, continue what we did in the past with SAT, what we can't say is, in the past we said, look for bad grammar, right? Look for, look for these weird links, things like that. Now we can't say we're going to take the same approach and tell people to look for these weird anomalies around somebody's face or their mouth or the voice, right? That's just, it's not fair, and they're not going to be able to do that, especially, as it's constantly getting better. So it's going to really, really rely on technology to be able to help address these emerging types of attacks.
Yes. And as a data nerd, the thing that really stands out to me from this slide is the 31.3% who say that deepfake is extremely impactful on what's coming up, in comparison to the other two, which are less than 20. So there's a much higher sense that this is something that creates a significant immediate concern for the practitioners in this research. We asked respondents to tell us what they thought AI would do with phishing over the next 12 months. No, sorry, that's not the correct way of saying, that's not the way the question was asked. Sorry, my error. We asked respondents to give us an indication of whether or not what they saw coming would increase, decrease, or leave same the amount of time that it took for their organization to deal with a single phishing email. Based on how they answered that question, we then asked them why they had said that. So for the green portion here, dealing with a single phishing email will take less time in 12 months. When we asked in an open-ended question, why did you say that? Here's some of the ideas that we got back from the practitioners. Better anti-phishing software, great. Improved employee training, great. Use of AI for detection and response, excellent. So these are some of the inputs for those practitioners who saw the amount of time declining. For those that saw the amount of time increasing over the next 12 months, these were the ideas that came through. And here's the headline, which I tripped up on when I first read it. AI is impacting phishing. AI results in attacks that are more sophisticated, complex, or more advanced. It's harder to detect and confirm as phishing, as obfuscation and other evasive techniques are introduced and leveraged. And threat actors using AI means greater sophistication across the phishing threatscape. We were also interested in, you want to ask about this?
Just a comment, if you go back to where you don't have the explanations there, you know, I like to simplify stuff, but the way I see this, what we're seeing here, what this says is 8 out of 10 of the security practitioners see the problem staying the same or getting worse. Only 2 out of 10 think it's going to get better. That's it.
An accurate read of the slide. Well done.
It. Yep. Simple math. Yeah.
Here we go.
Go ahead. Thanks.
I'm glad you're here. We also asked the practitioners in this research to give us a sense of how they were experiencing phishing beyond just email. So we've talked about multi-stage attacks, which involve going across multiple channels. So we first of all asked respondents if they were using these channels in their organization. And then for the channels that they were using, we asked if they were seeing phishing attacks in those or not. So the quick way, let's see if I can learn from Audian, the quick way of reading this slide is that between 5 out of 10 and 7 out of 10 of practitioners are using these tools and are seeing phishing attacks across the different channels and platforms that we've listed here. So this could be cases of pre-texting. Someone gets a text message which seeks to build rapport with them and then escalates through to an email or a shared document with a threat embedded in it. It could be multi-stage attacks where an attack jumps from text to a messaging app, then into Slack, or perhaps it begins on LinkedIn and then goes to something via text or messaging and then up to video conferencing.
Yep.
And being able to detect those multi-stage attacks requires the ability for IT and security teams to do correlation and have the optics to see those attacks unfold in real time across multiple channels. Or they could just be standalone attacks that as a result, for example, of compromising someone's Microsoft 365 credentials, a threat actor hangs out in teams for several months, learns the patterns, and then starts sharing things that are compromised and that we would classify as a phishing attack.
Right. And also a simple, another way that, we see this play out at times is it starts like in LinkedIn. And the way the attackers will do this is they'll automate adding comments to somebody's post, right? So they're building confidence, right? Hey, this is really good insight, or they'll ask questions. So, and the target victim sees that name a few different times, and this person liked me. They appreciate what I wrote, and then they send a connection request through LinkedIn, and then later on maybe they ask them, hey, we should meet. I'd love to learn more about this, and they send an invite, and in the invite there's an attachment, right? That maybe that's where the payload is, or then in some cases they take it all the way to a video conference. So the reason I say that is that people, when I try to walk people through these multi-stage type attacks and pre-texting, they think, that's pretty rare. I wouldn't fall for that. But if it starts with people complimenting what you post on LinkedIn and they do that for a while, everybody warms up a little bit. So that's an example of what we're talking about. It's a good slide. Thanks, Michael.
The final one that we'll talk about before we head to conclusions is that we had an open-ended question that asked what the respondent believed was the greatest innovation that would impact phishing over the upcoming 12 months. 52.4% of the responses from practitioners when I coded those related to AI. 24.2% talked about AI-powered threat detection. 21.9 just said AI. Another 6.3 talked about AI-powered threat detection and response that the first group hadn't. Other ones included advanced encryption, better employee training, zero trust email access. But AI was the one that dominated across this. So let's drive this to a conclusion, Audian, and then we'll open for Q&A. So in thinking about the research that we did in 2022, 4 weeks before generative AI hit the market via ChatGPT, and the most recent round of research, what we see is that AI is essential to the phishing cost equation on both sides, for threat actors and for defenders. Defensive AI is enabling organizations to decrease cost per phishing message and therefore get rid of phishing faster. But offensive AI is enabling threat actors to send more phishing messages and therefore are overwhelming the defenses that organizations have put in place. This game isn't over yet, and I know it's not a game, but this battle is not over yet, and organizations need to act accordingly to ensure that as threat actors increase their use of AI, that they are well positioned with technical capabilities that enable the detection and removal of messages, as well as maturing processes for security and IT teams to be able to drive this cost and impact to organizations down. And with that, here's our Q&A slide.
I'll just start off with the last slide there. You don't have to go back to it, but for sure, yeah, for sure, using AI is obviously something we recommend because that's what we do. But what I don't advise people to do is, even if you bought something like IRONSCALES, to think, okay, I have AI here, everything's done. You should look, best practices. Typically, we recommend that people do, defense in depth and layered security. You should look for AI up and down those layers, and that extends to any of your human, sorry, I think an HRM, yeah. So for instance, with your SAT and phishing simulations, you should be looking for that as well. It's still critically important, and now more than ever, that you regularly make your employees aware of these. The math holds true. So on a regular basis, I will study a group of our customers. The last one I did was about 2,000 of our customers who are using IRONSCALES, but also using Microsoft or Google and a SEG. So technically 3 layers of security. We're in a unique position because we sit at the very end of that. So we can count over a 30-day period exactly how many of these type of attacks that a SEG and or Microsoft or Google is missing. And on average, for every 100 mailboxes or every 100 employees per month, it's about 70 phishing emails. For some of you, might be thinking, oh, that's not too bad, given that we get 10,000, whatever. But it's important to remember that those 70 attacks, they got past 2 layers of defense, which is usually going to mean that they're more sophisticated. And if they weren't easy or obvious for one of those technologies to catch, then it's going to be even harder for your employees to be able to notice something as well. So you need to make them aware that the today's attacks are far more sophisticated, and not to be don't be hesitant to click that report phishing button to ask somebody to take a look at it, because they're constantly evolving. And the fact is, if it is an attack that's making it through, then there's a greater chance it's even more it's even a more dangerous type of attack. It's not a simple one where they're just asking, trying to find a way to get you to buy gift cards. They're trying to find a way to get credentials, or do account takeovers, or get information. So really pay attention to the human side of the equation as well. Michael, what if we do this again, which I hope we will do, and I don't want to wait 4 more years. If we do it again later this year, two questions for you. What do you anticipate the numbers to bear out to be, the main numbers that we pulled from this report, and what other questions do you think you might ask the practitioners?
Well, what we would like to see is that distribution of time brackets continues to move lower and lower. That as a result of changing approach, that practitioners are able to report that those numbers have gone down. That's what we want to see. Whether we do or not remains to be seen. And what the other thing that we would want to see is that IT and security teams are spending less time on phishing. There's more to do in security and IT than just deal with phishing. It is important, but we want that number to decline. It's gone up from 33.5 to 36.5. We want that to go down. Whether that happens or not remains to be seen. Yep. The second one was what are the questions that we would ask?
That's a tough one. I should have told you ahead of time to think about that.
Should have told you ahead of time. Yeah. You have stumped me on that one.
I'd be interested to also know, like, to ask them, I think it'd be good just to, as a way to kind of balance stuff, is ask them how much time they spend on some of the other areas in cybersecurity, right? Just for some, some comparison.
Triangulation.
Yeah, that'd be good for sure. I think that's important.
So for example, what I hear you saying there is, tell us what you would do on an average day. What proportion of your day you're spending on phishing? What proportion are you spending on this? What proportion are you spending on that? And that would give us a more grounded sense of how these numbers play out. That's what you mean, right?
I survey all of our new customers that we talk to, or any prospects we talk to. And I give a lot of open-ended questions. And one of my last open-ended question is what does a typical day look like for you? And across the board, almost always, there's about 20 to 25% of the time is spent not on cybersecurity, but it's doing reports and reporting up to management, and it's administrative stuff. So if they have 20, 25% of the time doing just administrative work, and then 30 to 40% of the time on email, there's not a whole lot left to work on, some of these other types of attacks that can, cause a lot of damage. So yeah, I'd like to have a full picture of that. A slight promo for IRONSCALES, we also measure how much time actually customers spend in our platform looking at a particular email attack. Most of them, we just automatically remediate. They don't have to spend any time on it. But there's a few that are borderline. They're like, I don't know, maybe you want to look at this. It might be something that's okay for your organization, your industry, for instance. On average, our customers spend 5.9 minutes a day working on email in total for everybody in the company. Some of the larger ones, it gets closer to 28 to 30 minutes. So what we see is a major shift there by adopting AI at our level, at the inbox level. And then when we work with them, we always encourage them, and we usually help them to optimize the settings that come natively with Microsoft 365 and Google. So we usually see a lift there as well.
And building on that, Audian, it would be interesting if we do this again to see if we could take anonymized data from across your data set and include that in a report that shows this difference between perceived and actual, and thread those two things together. That might be something we should talk about.
That's actually a good one. That's one that I can do. We're A/B testing this. We know we can measure how much. It'd be great to say, okay, a sentiment like, how much time do you feel like you're spending on this? Because we know how much time you're actually spending on it, right? And that's actually matters. The number that actually matters isn't the calculated number. It's the perceived number. If they feel like, gosh, this is a drag, I have to spend too much of my time on this every day, even if their perceived time is, off by a factor of 2, that still affects the performance of the entire team. If this is what's distracting them and dragging them down. And email security, obviously, it's one of the top 3 attack vectors, so it's important to address. But we should be able to get email security down to where it's not taking nearly that much time out of anybody's day. And that's the last of my pontification. And advertisements. Michael, this is a good report. I love your analysis, and your color commentary, by the way, is really insightful. It's a really good report. I encourage everybody. We popped the link up here. I encourage you guys to download it and give it a read. If you have questions, reach out to us. We'll be happy to help you out. Michael, thank you very much.
Thanks, Audian. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye, everybody.